Hello, dear ones. Father Peter John coming to you from the woods at All Saints Orthodox Church, Bloomington, Indiana. Christ is in our midst. You may recall that the church sits on the property of the old Johnson Quarry, and so we have these beautiful vestiges of the quarry behind me. There are so many places on the property where there are these stacks of stones, and I thought it was appropriate, especially today, while talking about the Stylites, to have as a backdrop some of these large stones, just to kind of give a little bit of a feel for what we're talking about. Anyway, today I'm talking about Daniel the Stylite. Now, yesterday we talked about St. Simeon the Stylite. He was the first Stylite, and Daniel had some contact with Simeon. I'm going to talk to you about that in just a minute. But first, Daniel, he grew up in what is modern-day Turkey, present-day Turkey. And his mother had been barren when she was married for the first number of years, and she had prayed to God that he would grant her a child. And she said to God that if he would grant her a child, that she would dedicate the child's life to God. And so this is what she did. She raised him. They were very faithful in the church. They would go and visit monasteries. And there was one monastery that they visited when he was a young boy, and he absolutely loved it there. And so she asked the abbot of the monastery if perchance he could come and live there. And the abbot of the monastery said, no, certainly not. You know, he's too young. We don't have boys here. We just have men here. And so when Daniel was 12 years old, he basically ran away from home, not because anything was going particularly wrong at home, but because he had that seed planted, that love for that monastery, that love for that monastic and ascetic life. And so it was planted in his heart. So when he was 12, he left home and he went to the monastery. His parents soon found out where he was, and they were so thankful to know that he was there. They went and visited him, and were given the opportunity to visit him as often as they wanted. So it was a mutually beneficial relationship in that way. Anyway, at one point, Daniel went on a trip. You know, sometimes monastics will go on pilgrimages, and the abbot of the monastery was going on a pilgrimage, and he brought Daniel with him. And so as they were going, they passed through the city where Simeon the Stylite was on his pillar. And as they passed through, you know, Daniel was just kind of gazing up and looking and seeing what this was above him, and this monk, I'm sure they had heard of him by reputation. And St. Simeon looked down upon him, and he blessed him. And some versions of the story actually say that Simeon prophesied that Daniel too would become a Stylite. But in any case, Daniel continued on his pilgrimage and visiting the holy sites. And eventually he settled in an old pagan temple that was in ruins, and that's what he used as his cell for a time. But eventually he got this idea, and I don't know if he was using pieces of the old pagan temple. You know, you could imagine that perhaps there were some old pillars or something left over from back in the day. I don't know. God knows. But he got this idea that he did want to go and live on top of a pillar like St. Simeon the Stylite had done. And so he went and he constructed this pillar somehow, put it together, and went up, and at the age of 47 started living on top of this thing. Well, his reputation spread, much like Saint Simeon's had spread, and before too long he was visited by the Patriarch of Constantinople, who, upon talking with him and praying with him, decided to ordain him a priest. So Saint Daniel then was ordained a priest, became Father Daniel. This all happened up on top of the pillar. So the Patriarch is up there. He ordains him a priest. They consecrate the Eucharist. The Patriarch serves Daniel communion, and then Daniel serves the Patriarch communion. And there's just this wonderful blessing up there. And then also, actually, Daniel was visited by two different emperors up on his pillar. So he, again, was known by reputation. He was a very holy man. This is really amazing. Listen to this. He was so devout, and he was so prayerful, and he had such a beautiful relationship with Christ that the effect of his prayer and the grace of the Holy Spirit that came down upon him actually affected the pillar as well. So people would come and they would touch the pillar and be healed of their diseases. So it became this place of pilgrimage where people would come to see Daniel and to ask his blessing and his prayers, but then touch this pillar and be healed by the grace of God that was flowing not only through Daniel, but through his dwelling, right? So, this is the story of Daniel, the Stylite. He lived until he was 80 years old and then fell asleep in peace in the Lord. May Daniel, the Stylite, pray unto God for us. Christ is in our midst. He is and ever shall be.